First, the culture at the DNC. And the buck stops somewhere. So you had a culture where top staffers are speculating about how to undermine Bernie Sanders, how to use his religion against him. You have her, personally, not senior staffers, trying to influence the news media, trying to tell Chuck Todd that Mika Brzezinski owes him an apology. My name came up dozens of times. DNC resources were being used to monitor my campaign and to discuss how to strategize, how to defeat me. I got lawyers looking at filing a Federal Election Commission complaint. So, you know, her use of the DNC in a non-neutral way violates the bylaws of the DNC. It's not ethical. It is counter to all she was saying she was doing at the DNC. It reflects on her honesty and character, and it certainly reflects on her judgment.
They're just completely wrong. We were neutral in this primary. We ran the primary. I ran the primary nominating contest exactly by the book, according to the Democratic National Committee rules, according to the rules state by state where primaries and caucuses were run. And again, I refer to what I said before about Senator Sanders' campaign team strategy. As he was losing, they needed to keep their supporters engaged, and they led their supporters to believe that somehow with each passing loss, there was something untoward or something manipulated about it. There is not only absolutely no evidence to suggest that, but even Simone Sanders, his former spokeswoman, said at the Democratic National Convention that the outcome of this primary was not rigged. Well, it's not just Lake Okeechobee. It's the overall Everglades restoration program that we've been fighting hard, and at various times over the course of the life of the Everglades restoration program, you know, the state has stepped up and then pulled back, and the federal government has stepped up and then pulled back. Actually, under President Obama, you know, we have had robust funding for, you know, Everglades restoration. The problem right now is that I want to remind everybody that the voters of Florida, with over 60% of the vote, because that's how you pass constitutional amendments, passed a constitutional amendment in 2014 that requires the legislature to use documentary stamp taxes for land buying. And the Florida legislature, under Republican leadership, refuses to do that. They have done everything they can to circumvent the will of the voters. That is the largest source of funds that we have for land purchases. And we need those land purchases, which I wholeheartedly support, to be able to make sure that we can reestablish the sheet flow of the water from the north to the south.
The single biggest contributor to her is Big Sugar Company. She takes tens of thousands of dollars from Big Sugar and from big agricultural companies. It's not just Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The Miami Herald had a piece 2-3 weeks ago that said over the last 22 years, Big Sugar has made $57 million in contributions to Florida politicians in both parties. Then you take a look at the environmental disaster that's unfolding there. For decades, you've had agricultural runoff into Lake Okeechobee, the fertilizers from Big Agriculture and Big Sugar both. Lake Okeechobee is filled with phosphorus and nitrates. It doesn't flow naturally into the Everglades the way it did for eons. Instead, we have a dike system there that diverts the water east and west towards the coastlines. It doesn't get filtrated the way it gets diverted into canals and into the St. Lucie Estuarian River, for instance. Since it doesn't get filtrated, it's filled with these toxins. Add to that rising temperatures, you've got the algae blooms, which is nothing but killing sea life. It's the stench of death when you go there and check it out. So this is a problem that's been brewing for decades. When Debbie Wasserman Schultz was a state representative, she voted for sugar subsidies. Well, I should say, what she actually voted for was to relieve the sugar industry of cleanup responsibilities for an extended period of time. So it's a regulatory subsidy. In the year she's been a congresswoman, she hasn't exactly been championing any kind of comprehensive solution. Charlie Crist, when he was governor, did have a solution. It was that the state would exercise eminent domain powers to take the sugar companies south of Lake Okeechobee, pay them just compensation for it, convert that land into marshland so that the plant life would naturally filtrate the phosphates and the nitrates, and the water would flow into Lake Okeechobee, from Okeechobee into the Everglades. That would replenish the Everglades, which are, the water flow is way too low in the Everglades right now. It would help replenish the aquifer of South Florida from the Everglades to Florida Bay. And I should say that aquifer, because of rising sea levels, has become increasingly salinated. So this is all, documented by scientists and geologists. That Charlie Crist plan made a lot of sense, and the state voters passed Amendment 1 to have an income stream from real estate taxes to pay for it. I think it was going to be $500 million. A lot of the blame falls on Governor Rick Scott for not executing that plan whatsoever. Debbie's been silent on it. Mm-hmm. Okay? She, to just be on the sidelines. In fact, it's a Republican congressman named Clausen from Florida who's introduced legislation to require the Interior Department to exercise the federal government's powers of eminent domain to take the sugar plantations, the sugar farms, convert it into marshland, and solve this problem already. So they really, the entire political establishment, including Debbie, I'm not trying to single her out, but I am running against her and not the entire establishment. The entire political establishment has been fine with taking a lot of money from Big Sugar for decades and not solving this problem. And the problem is only getting bigger. What it's doing up around Stewart now is hurting the tourist industry, undermining public health. People are getting sick just from breathing the noxious fumes. And it's undermining the water quality and perhaps even the aquifer of South Florida.
So you support this purchase of the land south of the lake and,
I
and
do,
so forth?
And Senator Bill Nelson finally came out. I have expressed some reservations and criticisms about the Iran agreement. I don't know if she has. I know she kind of flip-flopped a little bit on it. She originally held up a DNC letter of support for the agreement and then ended up agreeing with the deal. Now that it has been adopted, I'm for its strict implementation.